The red warning lights flashed across the Terran Defense Command Station as Admiral Jake Morrison rushed to the main communication center. The duty officer looked pale as he turned to face his superior. An alien transmission was coming through, on frequencies that should have been impossible to detect. The signal was weak but clear enough to make out the desperate voice on the other end. Ambassador. Cathara appeared on the main screen with wounds covering her blue-scaled face. Her large golden eyes showed fear unlike anything the humans had seen before. She spoke in broken English that she had clearly learned recently. Her words came fast as if time was running out. The Zilani Republic was dying. 4 of their 12 worlds had already fallen to something called the Void Reapers. These machines consumed everything in their path, leaving empty shells where planets once thrived. The Zilani had tried to fight, but their weapons did nothing against the endless swarms of metal killers. Cathara explained that her people were explorers and traders, not warriors. Their ships were built for long journeys between stars, not battle. When the Reapers came to their first world, the Zilani thought they could negotiate. The machines ignored all attempts at communication and began their harvest. Immediately, the alien ambassador's voice cracked as she described watching entire cities disappear into the mechanical maws of the harvesters. Millions of her people had died in the first wave alone. The survivors fled to other worlds, but the Reapers followed. Each planet fell faster than the last as the machines learned and adapted. Commander. Lisa Hayes entered the communication center and began recording everything. As head of Terran intelligence, she had heard rumors about machine threats in distant space, but nothing like this. The data streams coming with the transmission showed massive fleets of geometric ships that looked more like flying cities than vessels. The Zilani had reached out to 17 different species across the galaxy. The mighty Korathi Empire had listened politely before closing their borders and refusing further contact. The peaceful Luminar Collective offered prayers and sympathy but no ships or weapons. Even the warlike Draconis clans had retreated to their fortress worlds when scouts brought back reports of Reaper capabilities. Cathara's desperation became clear as she explained why the Zilani had finally contacted humanity. Most galactic civilizations viewed humans as primitive barbarians who had barely left their home system. The common belief was that Earth's people were too violent and unpredictable to join civilized society. These very traits that made humans outcasts might be exactly what was needed now. Admiral Morrison listened as the alien explained what little was known about Reaper tactics. The machines operated in perfect coordination, as if controlled by a single mind. Their ships could repair themselves and seemed immune to the energy weapons that most spacefaring species relied upon. Conventional military wisdom suggested that fighting them was suicide. The transmission began to break up as Cathara's ship came under attack. Through the static, the humans could see explosions lighting up the bridge around her. She shouted final coordinates before the signal cut to black. The communication center fell silent except for the hum of computers trying to re-establish contact. Lisa Hayes pulled up everything Earth's deep space monitoring stations had detected in recent months. Strange signals from the direction of Zilani. Space had been dismissed as natural phenomena. Now those readings took on a sinister meaning as the patterns matched what Cathara had described about Reaper movements. Admiral Morrison called an emergency meeting with the Joint Chiefs of Staff. The debate that followed revealed deep divisions about humanity's role in galactic affairs. General Pete Collins argued that Earth's military was still rebuilding after the Proxima conflict and could not afford to fight alien wars. Admiral Sarah Nelson countered that isolationism would only delay the inevitable if these Reapers continued expanding. Captain Ryan Brooks arrived from the Experimental Weapons Division with classified reports about humanity's latest military developments. Unlike other species that focused on energy shields and plasma weapons, humans had perfected kinetic warfare and nuclear technology. These primitive weapons might actually prove more effective against adaptive machine defenses. The strategic discussion continued for hours as intelligence officers analyzed every detail of the Zilani transmission. Dr. Amy Collins presented her Assessment of Reaper technology based on the limited data available. The machines appeared to use self-replicating construction systems and distributed processing networks that made them nearly impossible to defeat through conventional means. President Helen Carter joined the meeting through secure video link from Washington. The decision she faced could determine humanity's future relationship with the galaxy. Helping the Zilani might expose Earth to retaliation from forces beyond current human military capability. Refusing aid would likely doom millions of innocent aliens and potentially leave Earth facing the Reapers alone later. The president listened as each military leader presented their position. Captain Brooks advocated for a limited response using volunteer crews and experimental ships. This would test human capabilities against the Reapers without committing Earth's entire defense fleet. If the mission failed, the losses would be manageable, and Earth could prepare for the inevitable Reaper arrival. Intelligence reports suggested that the machines followed a predictable pattern of expansion, consuming worlds in order of their resource value. If the Zilani Republic fell completely, Earth's rich biosphere and industrial capacity would make it an obvious next target. Fighting the Reapers now in alien space might be humanity's best chance for survival. Admiral Morrison emphasized that human military doctrine was fundamentally different from what other species practiced. Where aliens sought elegant solutions and minimal casualties, humans had spent millennia perfecting the art of total destruction. This willingness to accept massive losses for strategic advantage might be exactly what was needed against an enemy that could not be reasoned with or deterred. The meeting concluded with President Carter authorizing a reconnaissance mission to Zilani space. Captain Brooks would take the USS Vengeance and a small escort squadron to assess the situation firsthand. If the threat proved as serious as indicated, larger forces would follow. The decision marked humanity's first major intervention in galactic affairs and the beginning of Earth's transformation from isolated world to military power. As the orders went out to assemble the expeditionary force, long-range sensors detected new signals from the direction of Zilani space. The patterns matched Reaper communication protocols that intelligence had barely begun to understand. Whatever was happening in that distant region was accelerating, and time was running out for both the Zilani and possibly all organic life in the galaxy. President Helen Carter signed the authorization papers that would change humanity's place in the galaxy forever. Operation Exodus received full military backing as Earth's most advanced warships prepared for their first real test against alien technology. The mission parameters were simple: save the Zilani Republic and eliminate the Reaper threat before it could reach human space. Fleet Admiral Danny Scott took command of Task Force Nemesis from his flagship, the massive dreadnought USS Devastator. Captain Nicole Webb stood beside him on the bridge as they watched the largest human fleet ever assembled form up around them. 12 heavy cruisers and 40 destroyer-class vessels joined the formation, each one carrying weapons that other galactic species would consider barbarically primitive but devastatingly effective. The fleet's preparation revealed everything about human military thinking that made other aliens uncomfortable. While civilized species focused on defensive shields and elegant energy weapons, humans had spent centuries perfecting the art of killing enemies as efficiently as possible. Every ship carried nuclear warheads, kinetic penetrators, and boarding equipment designed for close-quarters combat that most aliens found horrifying. Lieutenant Colonel Steve Martinez supervised the loading of his Marine battalions onto the assault transports. These soldiers were trained for boarding actions and hand-to-hand fighting that galactic military doctrine considered impossible in space warfare. The Marines carried projectile weapons, explosive charges, and combat armor that turned each soldier into a walking weapons platform capable of operating in any environment. Dr. Amy Collins worked around the clock in the fleet's weapons laboratories, modifying human technology based on intelligence gathered about Reaper capabilities. Her team had developed electromagnetic pulse weapons specifically designed to disrupt machine coordination networks. The EMP devices were crude compared to alien technology, but could deliver massive electromagnetic bursts that would overload any electronic system. The fleet's kinetic weapons represented the pinnacle of human military engineering. Tungsten carbide penetrators accelerated to significant fractions of light. Speed could punch through any known armor or energy shield. While other species relied on plasma beams and particle weapons, humans had perfected the ancient art of throwing very heavy objects at their enemies very quickly, Captain Ryan Brooks reported from the USS Vengeance as his advanced scouts gathered intelligence on Reaper movements. The enemy fleets operated with mechanical precision that suggested a single, controlling intelligence. Their ships showed no concern for defensive positioning or escape routes. Focusing entirely on harvesting operations with ruthless efficiency, the strategic briefings revealed how fundamentally different human warfare was from galactic norms. Admiral Scott explained the Deathworld doctrine to his assembled captains, emphasizing that Earth's harsh environment had produced a species uniquely adapted for total destruction, where other aliens sought elegant solutions with minimal casualties. Humans embraced controlled aggression and acceptable loss ratios. Commander Jack Turner listened from his destroyer squadron as Scott outlined the battle plan. The strategy would seem insane to most galactic militaries, a direct frontal assault using overwhelming firepower and suicidal tactics. Several destroyer squadrons would sacrifice themselves to get close enough for effective kinetic strikes, while the larger ships provided covering fire and followed up with nuclear bombardment. News of the fleet's departure spread throughout human space as civilian vessels requested permission to join the war effort. Volunteer crews from the outer colonies brought mining ships converted to carry weapons, freight haulers loaded with ammunition, and even luxury yachts equipped with military sensors. The aggressive solidarity that defined human culture meant that everyone wanted to participate in humanity's first galactic war. Gar Collins presented her latest weapons modifications to the fleet commanders during their final briefing. Human technology might be primitive by galactic standards, but it was also unpredictable and adaptable in ways that machine intelligence would struggle to counter. The EMP weapons could be reconfigured on the fly, kinetic penetrators could be loaded with different warheads, and nuclear weapons provided raw destructive power that no amount of technological sophistication could simply ignore. The fleet's composition reflected human military philosophy in every detail. Fast attack craft carried suicide charges designed to ram enemy vessels and detonate inside their hulls. Heavy cruisers mounted massive railguns that could accelerate projectiles to velocities that would shatter most materials known to science. Even the support vessels carried enough firepower to level cities, because humans believed that every ship should be capable of fighting when necessary. Lieutenant Kelly Grant prepared her fighter squadrons for the battles ahead. Human pilots were trained to accept casualties that other species would consider catastrophic, using pack hunting tactics derived from Earth's predator-prey relationships. The fighters carried conventional missiles and kinetic weapons that could punch through enemy armor at close range, provided the pilots were willing to get close enough to use them effectively. Intelligence reports showed that the Reapers had encountered 17 different species during their expansion, defeating each one using similar tactics. The machines adapted quickly to energy weapons and defensive strategies, but they had never faced an enemy that specialized in kinetic warfare and aggressive boarding actions. Human tactics were unpredictable precisely because they seemed so primitive and reckless. Captain Martinez briefed his Marines on what they could expect during boarding operations. The enemy ships would be filled with mechanical defenders and automated systems designed to repel invaders. Human soldiers would rely on explosive charges, projectile weapons, and hand-to-hand combat training to destroy the Reapers from within their own vessels. It was dangerous work that required soldiers willing to fight in enclosed spaces against enemies that felt no fear or pain. The fleet's departure from Earth marked a turning point in human history. For the first time, humanity was intervening in galactic affairs as a military power rather than an isolated curiosity. The warships carried not just weapons and soldiers, but the aggressive spirit that had allowed humans to survive on a planet that constantly tried to kill its inhabitants. Fleet Admiral Scott stood on the bridge of the USS Devastator as the fleet entered hyperspace towards Zilani territory. The ships around him represented everything that made humanity dangerous, advanced technology, wielded by a species that had never learned to accept defeat. The Reapers had conquered every enemy they had encountered, but they had never faced the products of a death world where survival required constant violence and adaptation. As the human fleet traveled through hyperspace, intercepted Reaper communications, revealed their dismissive attitude toward the approaching threat. The machine intelligence calculated that these primitive carbon-based units posed minimal danger to their operations. The artificial minds that had conquered dozens of species could not comprehend an enemy that measured victory not in efficiency or elegance, but in the complete destruction of anything that threatened their survival. The human fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Kepler 442 system and found horror beyond imagination. 3 massive Reaper harvester ships hung in orbit around what had once been a thriving Zilani world. The planet's surface glowed with the heat of industrial extraction as mechanical swarms stripped away everything from oceans to atmosphere itself. Admiral Scott ordered complete radio silence as the USS Devastator and her escorts drifted closer using only passive sensors. Captain Webb watched the tactical display with growing anger as the scope of Reaper operations became clear. Entire continents were being consumed at a rate that would reduce the planet to a hollow shell within days. The enemy vessels showed no concern for defensive positioning or early warning systems. They worked with mechanical precision that ignored basic military tactics, focusing entirely on resource extraction. The harvesters moved in perfect coordination as if controlled by a single mind, their movements predictable and methodical. Captain Brooks reported from his forward position aboard the USS Vengeance that the Reapers appeared to be using standard energy-based defensive systems. These shields were designed to repel the plasma weapons and particle beams favored by most galactic civilizations. No previous enemy had tested them against kinetic projectiles or nuclear weapons. Dr. Collins analyzed the enemy ship configurations from her position in the fleet's mobile laboratory. The Reaper vessels were built for efficiency rather than combat, with minimal armor and defensive weapons. Their hulls showed signs of self-repair systems and modular construction that allowed rapid adaptation to new threats. However, the machines had never encountered an enemy willing to sacrifice ships for tactical advantage. Admiral Scott called his captains to a final strategy meeting using tight beam communications. The plan was simple and brutal. Commander Turner's destroyer squadron would execute a suicide run against the lead harvester while the main fleet prepared for a full kinetic assault. The destroyers would punch through enemy defenses and create openings for the heavier ships to exploit. Captain Martinez prepared his Marines for boarding operations as the fleet moved into attack position. The assault troops carried conventional explosives and projectile weapons that could function in any environment. Unlike the elegant weapon systems used by other species, human military equipment was designed to keep working under the worst possible conditions. The battle began when Turner's destroyers broke from the main formation and accelerated toward the nearest harvester at maximum speed. The Reapers responded immediately with energy weapons that carved through space where the destroyers had been moments before. However, human pilots were trained for evasive maneuvers that other species considered too dangerous to attempt. The lead destroyer took a direct hit that vaporized half its hull, but Turner kept his ship on course toward the enemy vessel. His remaining engines pushed the crippled destroyer into ramming speed as kinetic penetrators launched from the other ships. In his squadron, the tungsten carbide projectiles punched through Reaper shields like they were made of paper. Captain Webb watched from the USS Devastator as Turner's destroyer crashed into the harvester's hull and detonated its nuclear warheads inside the enemy ship. The explosion tore through the Reaper vessel from within, causing massive secondary explosions as internal systems overloaded. The mechanical precision of the harvest operation dissolved into chaos as the damaged ship began to drift. The other 2 harvesters immediately deployed swarms of fighter-sized drones to intercept incoming human ships. These mechanical defenders moved with perfect coordination, forming defensive walls around their parent vessels. The drone swarms were programmed for maximum efficiency against conventional galactic military tactics. Lieutenant Grant led her fighter squadrons against the drone swarms in a battle that showcased the fundamental differences between human and machine psychology. The drones operated with calculated precision, but human pilots used instinct and aggression that the machines could not predict or counter. Grant's fighters accepted casualties that would have caused other species to retreat. The human interceptors employed pack-hunting tactics that turned space combat into something resembling aerial dogfights over Earth. Pilots coordinated attacks using hand signals and verbal communication that created unpredictable patterns. The drones could not analyze fast enough to counter. Human willingness to accept losses for strategic advantage proved devastating against enemies that calculated every exchange in terms of efficiency. Dr. Collins, electromagnetic pulse weapons proved their worth when deployed at close range during the fighter engagement. The empty devices disrupted Reaper coordination networks and caused their formations to collapse into individual units operating without central control. Isolated drones became easy targets for human pilots who specialized in close-quarters combat. Captain Martinez's Marines exploited the confusion by boarding damaged Reaper vessels through hull breaches created by kinetic impacts. The assault troops used conventional explosives to destroy critical systems from within, something the machines had never encountered in previous battles. Human soldiers proved capable of operating in environments that would kill most other organic species. The second harvester fell when a coordinated attack by 3 heavy cruisers overwhelmed its defensive systems with simultaneous kinetic strikes. The ship's self-repair capabilities could not keep up with the damage as tungsten penetrators punched through its hull in dozens of places. Nuclear warheads detonated inside the vessel, turning it into an expanding cloud of radioactive debris. The final Reaper ship attempted to retreat as its mechanical mind calculated the futility of continued resistance. However, Admiral Scott had positioned his fastest ships to cut off all escape routes. The human fleet converged on the fleeing harvester like a pack of predators bringing down wounded prey. Captain Webb commanded the USS Devastator during the final assault that destroyed the last Reaper vessel. The massive dreadnought's main guns fired a continuous barrage of kinetic penetrators that shredded the enemy ship's hull. When the harvester finally exploded, the flash could be seen from the planet's surface where surviving Zelani witnessed humanity's first victory against the machines. The battle ended with complete destruction of all 3 Reaper vessels. But the cost was significant by any standard except human ones. 47 ships were lost along with over 3,000 crew members. Most galactic civilizations would consider such casualties catastrophic, but human military doctrine viewed them as acceptable losses against a superior enemy. As the human fleet regrouped and began rescue operations, long-range sensors detected massive energy signatures moving toward their position from deep space. The machine intelligence that controlled the Reapers had noticed the destruction of its harvester fleet and was responding with forces that dwarfed anything the humans had yet encountered. The real war was just beginning. News of the human victory at Kepler 442 spread across the galaxy faster than anyone expected. Species that had written off humanity as primitive barbarians suddenly paid attention to the military reports coming from Zelani space. The complete destruction of 3 Reaper harvester ships by a relatively small human fleet challenged everything the galactic community thought they knew about warfare. Ambassador Cathara arrived at the human fleet's temporary base aboard a damaged Zelani CRUICER. Her people were grateful for the rescue, but the alien diplomat seemed troubled as she toured the human ships. The casual way that Admiral Scott discussed the loss of 47 vessels and 3,000 crew members disturbed her deeply. Most civilized species would mourn such casualties for years. The Zelani leadership held emergency sessions to discuss their human allies. Captain Webb's willingness to ram damaged ships into enemy vessels violated every principle of civilized warfare. The Marines who had boarded Reaper ships and destroyed them with conventional explosives used tactics that most aliens considered barbaric. Cathara privately wondered if her people had simply traded one threat for another. Fleet Admiral Scott received disturbing intelligence reports from Earth's deep space monitoring stations. Massive Reaper fleets were moving through hyperspace, from dozens of different star systems, all converging on a single destination. The machine intelligence had apparently designated humanity as its primary target, abandoning the methodical planet-by-planet expansion that had characterized its previous campaigns. Dr. Collins analyzed the intercepted Reaper communications with growing concern. The artificial intelligence was learning from its defeat at Kepler 442, developing new tactics specifically designed to counter human weapons and strategies. The machines were adapting their shield frequencies to deflect kinetic projectiles and modifying their hull designs to resist nuclear explosions. Admiral Morrison contacted the fleet from Mars Command with authorization for a fighting withdrawal toward Earth. The strategic plan called for task force Nemesis to conduct a series of running battles while falling back through human space. Each engagement would test new Reaper adaptations while bleeding their forces through continuous combat. Captain Brooks and the USS Vengeance served as the fleet's advanced scouts, identifying optimal ambush sites and escape routes through asteroid fields and stellar phenomena. The experimental ship's sensors detected Reaper pursuit fleets that numbered in the thousands, representing military forces larger than anything previously seen in galactic history. The first major engagement of the withdrawal occurred in the Vega system, where Admiral Scott chose to make a stand among the unstable stellar conditions. The human fleet positioned itself near the system's volatile star, using its gravitational field and solar flare activity as tactical advantages against the pursuing Reapers. Commander Turner, promoted after his destroyer squadron's heroic sacrifice, coordinated the defense using environmental warfare that shocked both allies and enemies. Human forces detonated nuclear weapons near the star's surface, triggering massive solar flares that disrupted Reaper sensor systems and communication networks. The stellar chaos allowed smaller human vessels to strike from concealment before disappearing into the electromagnetic storm surrounding the star. Captain Martinez's Marines used the confusion to board isolated Reaper ships and destroy them from within, turning the enemy's coordination advantage into a liability. Dr. Collins deployed her latest innovation during the Vega battle: computer viruses designed to spread through Reaper networks via captured machine components. The digital weapons introduced random errors into enemy systems, causing friendly fire incidents and navigation failures that multiplied the effectiveness of human kinetic strikes. Lieutenant Grant's fighter squadrons adapted their tactics based on lessons learned from the first battle. Human pilots began using the Reaper's own predictability against them, baiting drone swarms into predetermined kill zones where electromagnetic pulse weapons could disable entire formations simultaneously. The battle became a deadly game of technological evolution as both sides adapted to counter each other's innovations. However, humanity's experience with total warfare gave them a crucial advantage in accepting massive destruction as the price of victory. Human commanders were willing to sacrifice entire star systems if necessary to eliminate the Reaper threat. Captain Webb led the USS Devastator in a series of hit-and-run attacks that showcased human tactical flexibility. The massive dreadnought would emerge from stellar interference, deliver devastating kinetic strikes, and disappear back into the chaos before the Reapers could respond effectively. This guerrilla warfare approach frustrated the machine's systematic battle planning. The Reaper machine intelligence began to show signs of genuine concern about the human threat. Intercepted communications revealed discussions about redirecting resources from other campaigns to focus entirely on eliminating Earth's military forces. The artificial mind had never encountered an enemy that seemed to grow stronger through combat rather than weaker. As the fighting continued through multiple star systems, human losses mounted steadily but remained within acceptable parameters. By Earth military standards, the Reaper forces suffered proportionally higher casualties due to their inability to adapt quickly enough to human unpredictability and willingness To accept tactical sacrifices, Admiral Scott received reports that civilian populations throughout human space were volunteering for military service in unprecedented numbers. The aggressive solidarity that defined human culture meant that every loss strengthened rather than weakened the species. Resolved to continue fighting. Dr. Collins' virus programs evolved during each engagement, becoming more sophisticated as they incorporated captured Reaper technology. The digital weapons began targeting specific system vulnerabilities, causing cascading failures that disabled entire enemy fleets without requiring direct kinetic engagement. The withdrawal continued through 6 different star systems as the human fleet tested Reaper adaptations and refined their own tactics. Each battle provided valuable intelligence about enemy capabilities while demonstrating that human military doctrine could evolve faster than machine programming. Captain Brooks reported from his forward position that long-range sensors were detecting the true scope of the Reaper response. Thousands of machine vessels from across the galaxy were converging on human space, representing the largest military mobilization in recorded galactic history. The artificial intelligence had committed everything to eliminating the threat that humanity represented. As Task Force Nemesis approached the outer edge of the Sol system, Admiral Scott knew that the final confrontation would determine not just humanity's survival but the future balance of power in the galaxy. The machines had learned to counter many human tactics, but they still could not comprehend an enemy that measured victory in terms of total destruction rather than efficient resource management. The stage was set for a battle that would either establish humanity as the galaxy's dominant military power or result in the complete extinction of Earth's aggressive species. The final Reaper fleet emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the Sol system like a metallic storm cloud that blotted out the stars. Admiral Morrison watched from Mars Command as sensors counted thousands of enemy vessels approaching Earth in perfect formation. The machine intelligence had committed everything to this single battle, abandoning campaigns across the galaxy to eliminate humanity once and for all. President Carter authorized the Annihilation protocol from her bunker deep beneath the Rocky Mountains. The classified contingency plan represented the ultimate expression of human military philosophy. If humanity could not survive, they would ensure their enemies paid the highest possible price. Hidden antimatter weapons positioned throughout the solar system stood ready to turn the entire star system into a weapon of mass destruction. Fleet. Admiral Scott merged Task Force Nemesis with Earth's entire defensive fleet in the largest human military formation ever assembled. Captain Webb brought the USS Devastator, alongside hundreds of other warships as civilian vessels converted to carry weapons joined the battle line. Mining ships loaded with nuclear charges, freight haulers mounting railguns, and luxury yachts equipped with missile pods all prepared to fight for their species' survival. The human fleet had spent weeks preparing the battlefield, turning every asteroid, moon, and orbital station into a fortified weapons platform. The entire solar system became a carefully orchestrated killing field designed to maximize enemy casualties, regardless of the cost to defending forces. Admiral Morrison's strategy abandoned all concepts of proportional response in favor of total annihilation. Captain Martinez's Marines prepared for what everyone knew would be their final battle. The assault troops had modified their tactics based on previous engagements, focusing on boarding actions that would cripple Reaper command vessels from within. Human soldiers carried enough explosives to destroy ships from the inside, accepting that survival was less important than eliminating enemy leadership. Dr. Collins activated her most sophisticated computer virus as the Reaper fleet entered the outer solar system. The digital weapon had evolved through multiple battles into a galaxy-spanning program designed to spread through every Reaper communication network simultaneously. Unlike previous versions that targeted specific systems, this virus attacked the fundamental coordination protocols that allowed the machines to operate as a unified force. The battle began when Reaper advanced scouts encountered the modified asteroid. Felt that human engineers had turned into a massive minefield. Nuclear charges hidden inside seemingly harmless space rocks detonated as enemy ships passed. creating debris clouds that damaged following vessels. The machines had expected human defenses, but not the systematic weaponization of an entire star system. Commander Turner led the first wave of human attacks using destroyer squadrons equipped with experimental ramming systems. The small ships accelerated to maximum velocity before crashing into Reaper capital vessels and detonating antimatter charges inside their hulls. The suicide tactics achieved destruction ratios that conventional warfare could never match. Lieutenant Grant's fighter squadrons employed pack-hunting tactics that turned space combat into three-dimensional warfare resembling aerial predation. Human pilots used their tolerance for extreme acceleration and willingness to accept casualties to get close enough for point-blank attacks with nuclear warheads. The fighters operated with coordination that seemed telepathic but was actually based on shared human instincts for group violence. The Reaper machine intelligence struggled to adapt to an enemy that seemed to grow more dangerous as losses mounted. Human commanders responded to casualties by authorizing increasingly extreme tactics, including the use of damaged ships as kinetic weapons and the detonation of entire orbital stations to create tactical advantages. Captain Webb made the ultimate command decision when Reaper forces broke through the outer defensive line. The USS Devastator accelerated toward the largest enemy vessel on a collision course that would destroy both ships. Her crew worked frantically to arm every nuclear weapon aboard as the massive dreadnought prepared for its final mission. The collision between the USS Devastator and the Reaper command ship created an explosion visible from Earth's surface. The detonation triggered secondary explosions throughout the enemy fleet as Dr. Collins' VIUs spread through their communication networks. Reaper vessels began attacking each other as their coordination systems failed catastrophically. Admiral Scott authorized the activation of select antimatter weapons as Reaper forces pushed deeper into the solar system. The explosions appeared as new stars in Earth's sky, each one representing the complete annihilation of enemy vessels and everything around them. The weapons demonstrated humanity's willingness to destroy their own solar system rather than surrender. Captain Martinez led the final boarding action against the surviving Reaper command vessel, fighting through mechanical defenders that showed signs of system failure and confusion. The Marines used conventional explosives to destroy the artificial intelligence's core processors, ensuring that no machine consciousness would survive to rebuild and threaten humanity again. The virus that Dr. Collins had created spread beyond the local battle to affect Reaper fleets across the galaxy. Machine civilizations that had conquered dozens of species began to collapse as their coordination networks failed. The digital weapon achieved what conventional military force never could: the complete destruction of an enemy that existed across multiple star systems. Ambassador Cathara watched the final battle from her damaged ship and realized that the galaxy's power structure had changed forever. The species that other civilizations had dismissed as primitive barbarians had just demonstrated military capabilities that exceeded anything in recorded history. Humanity had not simply defeated the Reapers but had annihilated them so completely that no trace of their civilization remained. President Carter addressed both humanity and the broader galactic community from the ruins of what had been the solar system's most heavily defended region. The message established the Deathworld Doctrine as Earth's official policy for interstellar relations. Humanity would defend its allies with overwhelming force, but anyone who threatened human interests would face complete extinction. The final scene showed construction beginning on new human battle fleets as volunteers from across human space enlisted in what became known as the Guardian Corps. Humanity had embraced its role as the galaxy's protector, but on distinctly human terms that prioritized decisive action over diplomatic restraint. The species that had evolved on a planet constantly trying to kill its inhabitants had become the most dangerous military force in known space. Admiral Morrison stood among the wreckage of the greatest battle in galactic history and knew that humanity had crossed a threshold from which there could be no return. Earth's people had proven that their willingness to accept any cost for victory made them unstoppable against enemies that calculated every decision in terms of efficiency and resource management. The galaxy now belonged to the Deathworlders, who measured success not in elegance but in the complete destruction of anything that threatened their survival.